flaming chalice is the symbol of Unitarian Universalism. It suggests the transformations that take place when we are held within religious community. When we light the chalice in worship, we illuminate a world that we feel called upon to serve with love and a sense of justice. Please join us in lighting our chalice by reading together the words on the screen or in your order of service. We gather this hour as people of faith, with joys and sorrows, gifts and needs. We light this beacon of hope, sign of our quest for truth and meaning, in celebration of the life we share together.
As a community that comes together around covenant rather than creed, we make agreements with each other about how we're going to show up in the world, in our community with each other, in the wider world. And so each week we take a moment to re-covenant, to come back into covenant with each other, because hopefully our covenants are aiming high enough that we're going to miss the mark, at least most of the time. So the practice of just coming back into alignment, truing ourselves up, for any of you who have ever been into bicycling, where you true up a wheel and you bring all the spokes into alignment with each other so the wheel works well. That's the basic idea here. So I'll take a few lines from our covenant, and I would invite you to respond with, may we forgive ourselves and each other and begin again in love. So for all the ways that we have neglected to expand our spiritual growth and faith in action, may we forgive ourselves and each other and begin again in love. For all the ways that we have not committed our hearts and minds to building a community of caring, acceptance, and reconciliation, may we forgive ourselves and each other and begin again in love. For all the ways that we have not actively worked to build trust and respect in our community, may we forgive ourselves and each other and begin again in love. So now I invite you to just turn and look at these beautiful folks that are sitting next to you, sitting maybe a couple pews away. Wave your hands, smile at them. Maybe the folks on the other side of the camera as well. Welcome, welcome, everyone. And then please grab your hymnals, rise in body, your spirit, and join in singing hymn 346, Come Sing a Song with Me. Please be seated. So we are gathered together. We're gathered together on this Sunday before Thanksgiving. We're going to be feasting together in a moment, so there'll be a lot of time for some more casual conversation. But there's also some space right now for some intentional sharing of what's been on your hearts, what's been sitting inside of you, that maybe you feel ready to give voice to share with the rest of us so that we can hold it together. So I'm going to come around the room in a moment with the microphone, and if you have a joy or a sorrow to share, I would invite you just to share your name with us so that we know who you are. body or spirit and join in singing our doxology. Please open your gray hymnals to reading 567.
Good morning. I invite you now to open a gray hymnal, I'm sure you already have, you don't really need to, and join me in reading aloud responsive reading 567 in the back. I will read the regular text, and I invite you to join me in reading the italicized text. I want to be with people who submerge in the task, who go into the fields, harvest, work in a row, pass the bags along, who stand in the line and haul in their places. Generals, field deserters, move in a common rhythm. The food must come in, the fire must be put out. The work of the world is common as mud. Botched, it smears the hands, crumbles to dust. And evident. Greek amphoras, or wine, or oil, Hopi vases that held corn, are put in museums. But you know they were made to be used. Pitcher cries for water to carry, and a person for the work that is real.
Okay, this part's me.
Okay.
So last month we talked about settling into one's true shape, and as an individual, as a congregation, not trying to be all things to all people, but the danger in that is becoming comfortably complacent in who we already are, never growing or changing. But sometimes in our attempt to take our true shape, usually we have to move beyond our familiar shape, which can be uncomfortable. It can be new, it can be different. The posture can make some aches come up in our body in unfamiliar ways. Even if we were to suddenly gain the ability to fly or to become invisible, you might love it, you might think it's really cool, but it would still take some awkward adjusting until it felt more familiar. Last week we talked about the inevitability of a change, how that can sometimes force us to adjust. After all, your children are going to age, and so eventually it becomes inevitable that you accept the fact that they are going to age. But what about when something isn't inevitable, but it's still important to us? Important enough that we are willing to be uncomfortable. And so I'd invite you to just sit for a few moments with the question, what's something that is so important to you that you are willing to be uncomfortable? What's something that's so important to you that you're willing to be uncomfortable? And so as we think about this to ourselves for a few moments, Jeremy's going to play for a bit, and then once he's done, then we'll talk a little bit about it with each other. But just for now, just think about it silently to yourself. What's something that is so important to you that you are willing to be uncomfortable? So having rolled around with that question for a moment, I invite you to turn to one person sitting next to you, maybe two at the absolute most, and just talk for 2 minutes about whatever came up for you, whatever you feel like sharing in that. And I'll let you know when the time is up. Okay, thank you for sharing with each other. Thank you for listening to each other, for seeing whatever arose in your moment of interaction. And so I'm curious, what did you either hear yourself saying or hear somebody else saying that stuck out to you? What did you notice in the reflecting on it? What did you pick up on in this? What did you take from it? Just what's sifting out for you from this?
Yeah, we sort of agreed here in our little group that self-introspection in the form of meditation is very important to face the uncomfortable, and otherwise there can be no change.
The discomfort is often so big that if we don't have some kind of practice to handle it, it forecloses on the change at all. Yeah, thank you, Jerry.
Joni said something that really struck me. He said he's willing to be uncomfortable for anything that helps other people feel better. I thought that was so cool.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you both. Yeah.
Okay, so I was just sharing how it's very vulnerable and hard for me to speak up about how with my partner who I love and trust and knows he has my best interest in mind, it's still very vulnerable for me to tell him to touch me in the way I want to be touched. Like really hard. And you know, like I'm a sex therapist, that you feel like that shouldn't be hard, but I still gotta live my life. You know, like I don't just give advice, I have to take it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for
But
sharing. Wait, what was that?
I'm worth it, right?
Worth it, yes, yes. You are worth it. You are worth it, totally. Beautiful. Thank you, everybody. Yeah, there's partly what I love about what each of you shared is that it wasn't necessarily some big thing, it wasn't some grand gesture. It's all the simple things that we face in our regular day-to-day existence. So beautiful. Thank you all. And now we've got a story for you.
Once, a monk sat on the banks of the Ganges River with one of his students. As they watched the water flow by, a large scorpion making its way along the steep banks fell into the water and began to struggle and drown. Without hesitation, the monk reached in and pulled the scorpion from the water. As he placed it on the bank, surprise, it stung his hand. Several minutes later, this same scorpion fell again into the river and commenced to drown. Again, the monk reached in and again was stung as he set the scorpion on the bank. A third time, the scorpion fell, and a third time it was retrieved by the monk with the same results. The student could no longer restrain himself. "Master," he asked, "why is it that you keep saving that beastly scorpion from drowning?" "Can't you see that it is just going to sting you?" "Yes, I know that it is going to sting me," laughed the monk. "It is the dharma of the scorpion to sting. But it is my dharma to save." Now, please rise in body or spirit to join in singing hymn number 69, Give Thanks. Be seated.
So we're in the second week of this new series, and just to give a quick recap of last week, I talked a little bit about sleep patterns that worked really well for me when I was in my teens and 20s that became less and less functional as I got into my 30s and 40s. And I talked about the books of Robert Caro, which were these massive endeavors, He's still writing his sixth book, the fifth volume on Lyndon Johnson, which I'm sure will be amazing once it finally comes out. These massive endeavors that were only possible in a world in which a family could survive on a single income, and in which it was expected that the man's wife would be supporting him in his work. Our 1950s model of church was also a massive endeavor that was only possible with two things. One, a societal expectation of involvement in some kind of church or synagogue, and a huge supply of free, skilled labor of so many women who are not working outside the home. Another norm from the 1950s was a great trust in institutions. When we recognize the patterns and expectations of the past that are no longer operating, we get invited into new ways that oftentimes are really uncomfortable. Even if we want them, even if we desire that new thing, it's often uncomfortable just because it is different, it is unfamiliar. So last week I talked about not settling for being a lifestyle enclave of people who belong to a similar demographic, but instead to orient ourselves by a shared commitment to some larger purpose or goal. in the words of James Kokomo. The shared demographics are only of interest to a small sliver of the community. People who can come in for a couple of Sundays and decide, nope, not my demographic, can easily decide, I'm going to look for my demographic elsewhere. A clearly articulated shared purpose or mission, on the other hand, can appeal to those who are beyond our demographic. And when mission is truly placed at the center, to the point that feeling at home is no longer at the center, to the point that easy and interesting conversations are no longer at the center, then the sense of community becomes a byproduct of that shared purpose for which everyone is sacrificing something. Does anybody know the election results for the presidential race in the state of Indiana? Approximately 60-40? Any other guesses? So there were 1.7 million people who turned out to vote for Trump. There were 1.2 million people who turned out to vote for Harris. There were 53,000 people who voted for a third party. And there were 2.1 million who did not vote for anybody. There are all sorts of reasons, from disappointment in the options that are available to strategic choices around, well, maybe if we do this, then it'll force some kind of political change, to general apathy about what's going on. So a whole host of reasons why people make the voting decisions that they make. And I bring this up not to bring voting to the forefront, but instead to do the opposite. Those of us who pay attention to politics, those of us in our demographic, can forget that it is most often in a different place, if anywhere at all, in other people's consciousness, in other people's minds. So when we cast ourselves out of the demographic of folks who pay attention to politics, who know what's going on, who are watching the news, how does the world look through those other eyes? This week I'll be extending some of the lines of inquiry from last week and also prepping us for the next 3 weeks when we'll hear from some others in the congregation. I went to the Star King School for the Ministry, which is one of 2 Unitarian Universalist seminaries in the world, and it's part of the Graduate Theological Union in Berkeley, California. And the Graduate Theological Union has 9 different seminaries. There's a Presbyterian seminary, and a Baptist seminary, and a Congregational seminary, and an Episcopalian seminary, and a Franciscan seminary, and et cetera, et cetera. There's 9 of them. I'm not going to recount them all. And so one of the benefits of going to Star King was we could cross-register at any of those other schools and take classes at any of those other schools. And so I took this one class with the Franciscans. Not with the Franciscans. With a different group of Catholics that I'm blanking on the name of right now, and so I'm sorry for that. But it was a class called Experiments in Prayer and Meditation. And so each week we would engage in a different form of prayer or meditation, and just as an experiment, just to sort of see what happened. And so one of the weeks, for instance, everybody in the class, regardless of gender, was supposed to meditate on what it might be like to be Mary and to be told that you will be giving birth to the Son of God. And so it's one thing to sort of get that on a conceptual level in a class on a Friday morning. And it's another thing to meditate on that continuously throughout the week. And to come back the next week and say, I would have been furious. This is ridiculous. Why are you doing this to me? So those sorts of experiments. But one of the experiments was specifically in the Ignatian Examen. And for any of those who aren't familiar with it, I'm not going to go into all the specifics, but generally there's a reflection on the day. You think back over all the course of the day and let it kind of sit in your soul and see where that reflection takes you. And so I took this on as this experiment for a week, and I found that often I would sit down at the end of the day and I would be roiling with frustration. Like, I can't believe that they did that to me at the bank, and I've got this bill to pay, and I've got these other things I could do. And so that's the state in which I would sit down. And then as I would recount everything that happened to me over the day, that frustration, that resentment would slowly give way to gratitude. As I remembered, yeah, I might have had a terrible time at the bank, but that teller was really nice to me. She was really kind about this. She's like, I know this is kind of messed up, but this is sort of the process we need to go through. And so just getting to have that human-to-human connection. And yes, there was a really long line at the grocery store, but they had this gum that I really loved that was there. And so I got to pick up that gum and really enjoy it. Just every minute aspect of the day, every single time I would do it, would give itself over to gratitude. And not just gratitude of like, oh, wasn't that sweet? But gratitude like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that I got to live this life in this way. I can't believe that I got to meet these other people's souls, that I got to show up to the beauty of the world, and that I get to do it again tomorrow. There's those moments in which we are able to reconnect to gratitude. Not making the bad thing disappear, not trying to paper over it or pretend that it's not there or completely forget it, but rather just add it into the mix. Open the scope of our gaze onto the entirety of our existence. I talked before about walking down the aisles of Target. And it's always a fascinating experience to do that, to try to do that in a mindful way. It's been a little bit, maybe a couple months since I've last been in a Target, so I apologize, my mental picture is not perfect. But there's somewhere between like 3 and 6 shelves, usually, if memory serves, in each one of those rows. And they go maybe like 15, 20 feet long or so. And there's obviously a couple, just one on each side. How many products would you imagine is in one of those aisles? 100? 150? Depends on if you're in the office products aisle, maybe more. If you're in the furniture aisle, maybe less. Let's say an average of 100 over the course of the store. And how many aisles are there in each one of those stores? Maybe 100 of those aisles. So what's 100 times 100? 10,000? So maybe 10,000 products in the actual store, not counting the stuff that's back in the stock. And then how many of those stores are there across the country? Maybe a couple thousand of those, maybe more. And the numbers start to add up pretty quickly of all of these products that are available to us, that are just sitting on shelves somewhere, ready for us to buy. And for each one of those products, the resources had to be gotten from somewhere. The people had to put it together. The factories had to be put together. It had to be brought to us in some way. The place where we buy it had to be cleared of whatever was already there, whether it's a trees or a forest or houses or whatever else, and replaced with this big store for us to go to. And then some kind of security, maybe police, maybe a security force to make sure that the property stays where it's supposed to be. All these little ingredients into us being able to have that consumer experience. To have our little bit of what's going on. There's a line from Wendell Berry. We all live by robbing nature, but our standard of living demands that the robbery continue. People have sometimes talked about the U.S. being an empire like Rome or many others. What is an empire but a collaboration of law and economics? To have more stuff, to have more safety. In the words of historian William Appleman Williams, empire is the child of an inability or an unwillingness to live within one's means. Empire as a way of life is predicated upon having more than one needs. And it can become habit forming. The more stuff that I can get at Target or Walmart or Costco, the more tempting it is to just continue with that accumulation process. When I was doing election canvassing before the election, I knocked on this one guy's door as I was coming up to the house. It was a smaller house, but it had a Lexus in the driveway. And when I knocked on the door and I started talking to this person about his election preferences, and he talked about why he was voting the way that he was voting, I noticed that his complaint that led to his decision of how to vote was the price of groceries. Like, the price of groceries is ridiculous. In my mind, I was like, you've got a Lexus in the driveway, and you're complaining about the price of groceries. But of course, I don't know this person's circumstances. I have a good friend of mine who really does not have enough money, has a tough time getting by week to week, who just happened to be given a really fancy Volkswagen because somebody was getting rid of it, and that's what was available. And so the fancy car doesn't necessarily indicate how well somebody's doing. But in my own mind, I could go to my own similar place, my own feeling of not having enough, of wanting more. So even if whatever this one guy's circumstances are, I could identify with that within myself, of what I was projecting onto him, my own addiction to a sort of entitlement to a way of life that in practice often ends up destroying the land, exhausting its resources, alienating and exploiting human labor, becoming internally and externally reliant upon that way of life. Anybody who has ever struggled with addiction knows that change is hard. We become used to a particular way of doing things, and breaking out of that can feel almost impossible. But a church is a place that can help us get free. A church is a place that can help us get free. What's necessary is for us to acknowledge the patterns that we're caught in, to reckon with where the path that we're on is headed, and most importantly, to take steps to move in a new direction. Now, I can get up here and I can say some stuff, and maybe it might be funny sometimes, or maybe it might be boring sometimes, or maybe it might be smart sometimes, or any number of different things. And that can be somewhat helpful. But what's most helpful is a regular and ongoing intervention, a strategy of mutual recovery, collective and long-term disciplines of turning around that gets to the roots of our contentment, a political therapy or therapeutic politics that helps us recover from whatever individualism or entitlement we've been enculturated into through being in this society. As we talked about in the last series, A House of Hope, where we covered ecclesiology, which is this fancy theological word for what church means, we talked about how a religious community is essential. A religious community where we can establish and uphold systems of accountability and support that are vital in sustaining a new way of being with each other, a new way of being with ourselves, a new way of being in the world. Church can be crucial as a place of understanding and identity in the face of our temptations. A community that is discontinuous with the rest of society, making a break with the unhelpful patterns of the past, while grounded in the vital legacies that nourish our deeper selves. Last month, we had a congregational retreat that was designed to help us in doing that. And I was really grateful to learn from the process that we were led through. The first thing that we did was we made a list of our congregational strengths in order to ground us in the best of who we are, and to prevent us from getting into that fantastical New Year's resolution mode of like, I'm going to go to the gym every day, and I'm going to work out for 3 hours, and it's going to look like this. Instead, who are we already? What are our strengths as we are, without needing to add or change or improve anything? And then in the retreat, our second step was imagining a time 25 years into the future and considering what is the best First Unitarian Church of Hobart. What would that look like in 25 years? Which takes us beyond trying to solve current problems. So think back to 25 years ago, 1999. How many of today's problems would you have forecasted? So similarly, when we think 25 years into the future, to 2049, it involves us reaching beyond our analysis of the current problems, reaching into what is calling to us. And then the third thing that we did, building on those first two, was listing out some specific goals for the next 3 years to move us towards those 25-year goals. There were some newer folks there, there were some longer time members there, and mixing those voices together, we came up with these 5 goals of establishing and maintaining full-time ministry in light of the fact that I will be leaving at the end of January, congregational mentor program for new members and visitors, holding an annual Give-Get Fair. It's June, I meant. I said January? June. My apologies. They should not have months that start with the same letter. My apologies. I was trying to build up some momentum there. Okay, so those 5 goals. Establishing and maintaining a full-time ministry. Congregational mentor program for new members and visitors. Holding an annual Give-Get Fair. Becoming energy independent via solar and wind by 2026. And developing, training, implementing lay-led worship services with advanced planning before I leave at the end of June. So those are the key things to do. I'm leading one of them, and the board is tasked with figuring out the order in which to do the other ones. But in doing all of them, I call on you all. You all gathered in this room, you all joining us online, you all in the broader network of the congregation, to weave into those 5 goals the wisdom of those who've been here a while, and the wisdom of those who are newer, and the wisdom of those who have yet to set foot in this building, and the wisdom of that which is beyond us, that which is greater or deeper, call it the ultimate, call it the eternal, call it our dharma, that which is our proper role or vocation, that may be uncomfortable, might be painful even, but which is ours. It's quite likely that over the coming 4 years, there will be a lot of political volatility. In the course of pursuing each of our 5 goals, how can we meet that volatility? What will be our response to people's outrage or radicalization or desperation or apathy or disempowerment? How can we extend the welcome table to those outside our demographic, but inside our mission? There's that song, "We're going to sit at the welcome table." And certainly it's one that I have known and sung for years. I was at a minister's retreat at one point getting trained in interim ministry when I first started in professional ministry. And we gathered together at the end of one of the breaks as we were coming together, and we sang this song. We sang a song at the end of every break to rally folks together so folks in the hallway would hear us singing and they would know to come back into the room to get back into the session. And so we were singing, "We're going to sit at the welcome table," and we got through a couple of verses of it. And then one of the ministers stepped back aghast and said, "I can't believe that I'm in a room full of white people talking about wanting to be at the welcome table." And in the moment, there was this uncomfortable silence. There wasn't a response from anybody immediately. We kind of shifted awkwardly back into the session. But as I sat with it, as I thought about it, I noticed there's a few different ways of reading that song. We can read it in terms of like a prosperity gospel kind of way, of like, the welcome table, that's where all the money is, let's all get the money. We can listen to it from more of the slave's perspective, and maybe there were some slaves who wanted to be the slave master, but I would guess that most wanted to dismantle the whole slave master system, have all of that go away. We can listen to it from an abolitionist perspective, in which case the welcome table looks like something maybe a little bit different. As we sing it later on in the service, I would invite us to think about the welcome table as something that we are creating for not just ourselves, others, and also welcoming in new parts of community, new ways of being in the world, welcoming maybe the parts of ourselves that have gone away or been smaller, as a way of welcoming a new world into dawning, a new world that probably looks a little bit less like this one than we might think, and that might similarly be uncomfortable, might similarly be painful in some ways. How in the pursuit of those 5 goals, those establishing and maintaining full-time ministry, a congregational mentor program for new members and visitors, holding the annual Give-Get Fair, becoming energy independent via solar and wind, this lay-led worship service training, how in the pursuit of those goals can we be committed to extending the welcome table ourselves into being something that is truly welcoming, that truly broadens community, that truly extends our mission into the world. May we bring our gifts of love and service to the altar of humanity. May we continuously gift ourselves and each other through our actions, the countercultural reminder that we are not isolated beings, but connected in ministry, in miracle, and in mystery. Connected to the universe, connected to this community, connected to each other. May we move in a common rhythm as we do well the thing worth doing, such that we get to sense the satisfying shape. May we give thanks as we make a place at the welcome table, not just for friends, not for enemies, but for those hundreds of thousands in Northwest Indiana that don't come so easily to mind. May we have faith in life to do wise planting, that the generations to come may reap even more abundantly than we. May we be bold in bringing to fruition the golden dreams of human kinship and justice. And may that ever be so.
We choose to welcome the spirit of life, to join in our aliveness and to share our resources. This month we are sharing our Loose Change for Social Change offering with Hearts in Motion. Through December 15th, we're collecting to help Hearts in Motion provide a better Christmas for abused women and their children. So if I can have 4 volunteers come forward. The money in the cups will go to Hearts in Motion. The money in the baskets goes to sustaining the missions of our organization. And for those not with us in person today, there is an online link for both one-time and regular donations. For your prayers, your presence, your service, and your gifts, we are truly grateful. Another way that we walk together is by joining together for fun and fellowship. There will be an interfaith Thanksgiving service on Tuesday, November 26th. That's this Tuesday at St. Mary of the Lake Catholic Church in Miller. Pastor Thomas taking a part in that. Nice. Doors are open at 6:30 with an organ prelude, with service to follow at 7 p.m. All are welcome. Please see Sandy if you'd like to have some more information on that. We are having a fundraiser on the Sunday evening before Christmas, a one-man Christmas carol featuring Grant Fitch. I hear that's not bad. He's been doing that for more than 20 years, so he's going to keep doing it until he gets it right, I guess. Sunday, December 22nd, doors are opening at 5 p.m. for appetizers and cash bar. Shows at 6. Tickets are $25 at the door. Bring your friends and family to a fun holiday event. The angel tree will be up today in the parish hall. Sign up and take an ornament if you'd like to shop for a child on the tree. The family is also expecting a newborn at Christmas time. I know, right? So newborn gifts are welcome as well. No need to sign up for those. Gifts are due by December 15th. Please unwrap with receipts. See Michelle if you have questions. And finally, we are partnering with Citizens for a Sustainable Hobart to collect 1,000 pounds of plastic bag waste within the next 10 months. If we meet that challenge, there'll be a bench built out of recycled materials for our community. The Shirley Hines Land Trust will be contacted to determine a location. The bin is located in the parish hall. Please read the signs posted in the parish hall about what can and cannot be collected in the box, as there has been some materials that are not able to be recycled by this company found in the box. Just saying. Now, if you'll please rise in body or spirit to join in singing and sit with the discomfort if it's a little uncomfortable. Hymn number 407, we're going to sit at the welcome table. Well done, white people. Please be seated. And now, may we have faith in life to do wise planting, that the generations to come may reap even more abundantly than we. May we be bold in bringing to fruition the golden dreams of human kinship and justice. This we ask, that the fields of promise become fields of reality. invite you now to join me in reciting the words in blue on the screen to accompany our extinguishing of the chalice. May we continue to carry in our hearts the light of truth, the warmth of community, and the fire of commitment until we are together again.
We won't be doing a discussion about the worship service this morning. Somebody told me there's food.